So, today, there was a possibility that a Muslim communist was going to win. And I know what you're thinking. Haz, you're talking about Zoran, right? Zoran already won. No, I'm talking about an actual Muslim communist. So, let me give you the story from the top. A few months ago, there was a good guy. He's a good guy. Brigham, he's a good guy. I keep calling him Brigham Young, but his name is Brigham Keys, the Mormon guy. No, his name's Brigham Keys. Some of our comrades in Georgia got into contact with him a few months ago. I think sometime in the summer. Brigham Keys is a good guy. He's a communist before our party. He liked our message and got into contact with our party. He met some of our party people. And he just so happened to be campaigning for mayor in Fitzgerald, Georgia, which is a Republican conservative town. And he's a communist, and he's well liked in his community, and he's a good member of his community. Basically, what happened is that he didn't have resources. He wasn't campaigning with anything close to what his opponents had, and he was just straight up going word of mouth. So he wasn't launching this giant canvassing campaign. It was very modest in size, very small scale kind of thing. It was an interesting test run for future endeavors like this that we may do as a party, because we didn't do this as a party. He was just doing it all by himself, but he joined the party later on in the middle of it. And the reason we didn't give a flat out public endorsement is because we didn't think the odds were very high that he could win, and we couldn't commit the resources because there was no way we could make it more likely within the short time span regardless. Here's the thing. I was given information which was an honest mistake, but it led me to believe that he had a shot. He actually had a shot, and it'll be close, or he'll potentially even win, and he didn't. He got about 7% of the vote, which, look, it's a small Republican town. It's about 100 random people who aren't communists voted for him just because they liked him and they liked what he was saying, which was not nothing. It's honestly, it's not nothing, okay? Now, why am I even bringing this up? Because I was going to cover it, and I didn't think it was guaranteed at all. We were given some incorrect information a week before this happened. Before then, we had a pretty realistic, clear view about it, but just a week ago or so, we were given mistaken information. But why am I talking about this? Because the smart thing to do is just to not even talk about this, right? But you know what? I want to do this and actually talk about this. So look, Comrade Brigham is in very poor spirits. He's in very poor spirits, and he's devastated. He is shocked. He is genuinely shocked and devastated. He just had no idea it was going to be this bad and this severe. He was expecting that this was going to be close, at least, based on his experiences on the ground, how much positive reception he was getting, and how well known he was. There were some of our comrades that had went down to Fitzgerald, and they did contact the local community, and they did meet a lot of people, and a lot of people came up to them. They made a very good impression. They were popular. People liked them. People liked him. They liked what he was saying, apparently. But instead of despairing, in the spirit of Mao, I want to actually talk about what should we walk away from this from a critical perspective. Because this campaign wasn't organized by our party at all. I don't want, instead of him being demoralized, I think the correct thing is to walk away. I think there should be a critical reflection. And my sense is this is relevant for ACP, for a party, right? There is a broad tendency of, let's call it Marxism, Leninism, I don't know, traditional style or OG style, so to speak, right? The classical kind in Western countries, where people are not too fond of the culture war stuff. They're not fond of the woke stuff and things like that. And that's fine, but the problem is that it's insufficiently developed in the sense that it leaves room for something I want to call naive cultural realism. We're basically not embracing the new era that we live in. I'm talking about how the information age has fundamentally disrupted and changed the nature of how culture, consciousness, and socialization occurs. Sometimes wokes can maneuver you in terms of how advanced they are just because they're a little more in tune with being grounded in reality to some extent. I notice a tendency among the type of MLs that just want to be like a strict orthodox ML, like a classic ML, where they're guilty of ideology. It's a problem of ideology. People are like, what the fuck are you even coming at this from? And I'll explain it. What I'm basically trying to say is that the attitude that postmodernism is just a bunch of bullshit and we need to just go back to naive realism is fundamentally mistaken. I'm not going to say this in a politically accusatory way, but more in a general kind of way. It's reactionary because you're not embracing the essence of the new era. That doesn't mean you have to follow every stupid new trend, but it does mean you cannot retreat from the world and live in an ideological cope world of delusion. You can't put on LARP outfits unironically and be like, I revolt against the modern world. Let's return to the time when we didn't have to deal with all new challenges that we face as a civilization and a society. That's what I think is fundamentally problematic. And I also think that ideology in general, it's not just communist ideology, it's all ideology in general, has this effect where when you retreat into it at the expense of the world, this is actually especially true for Marxism, if I'm going to be honest, because there's a certain type of naive cultural realist Marxism which basically says, I could just go directly to the masses and directly to the people. I can know what the people and the masses are based on my personal interactions with them. And that we need to be offline instead of being terminally online. We need to go offline and make friends with as many people as we can. In this way, we have a pulse on the attitude and spirit of the masses. The terminally online aspect of civilization is a fundamental part of civilization. You cannot bypass it and retreat back into the world of interpersonal immediacy and interactions at that level. And I think what was happening in Fitzgerald was that there was an incorrect appraisal about the prospects of winning the race based on the positive reception that came with all of these different immediate personal interactions. There wasn't a sufficient degree of abstraction and an insight into the abstract and alienating dimension of scale. Scale is alienating. Scale means it doesn't matter what the human face is, it's the fucking numbers, right? That's scale. Scale is the complete opposite of the romanticism of personability, the complete opposite of the romanticism. I'm just a good old local. You need to be fucking ruthless. You need to be ruthlessly alien. In a sense, you need to absolutely be realistic in the postmodern sense. You need to be realistic in the sense that you understand that every ideology is not directly the same thing as reality, including communism, including Marxism-Leninism is not directly reality. Some MLs will say, why are you an ML? Because it's directly reality. That is not true. Historically, to be a Marxist-Leninist was something that the reality that tempered and continuously affirmed that outlook was the culture of the party. It was a working environment, so to speak, and that was the material source of that reality. Everyone always understood that it's not directly reality. There's all sorts of delusions and fantasies and ideological biases. Furries genuinely think that they're spirit animals or something. Like, they genuinely think that. For them, that's directly reality. And these are ways of insulating ourselves from reality. The alienating, cold dimension, the brutality of the world, the brutality of existence, the brutality of reality. And nobody should be insulating themselves, whether it's through an ideology, whether it's through any kind of other hug box, whether it's through a religion. Nobody should be insulating themselves from the brutality of the real. And that's where I'm coming from. I'll say this unabashedly. I have faith in the revolutionary cause even before Marxism. Revolution is what dialectics talks about. That's the objective thing. It's a brutality of existence. It's a reality that constantly disrupts all comfort zones, all senses of safety, all established things will be brought to the mercy of their real premises. And that is a brutal, revolutionary violence of existence. The movement of the heavenly bodies is compelled by a violent revolutionary principle. And if there appears to be harmony in the cosmos, like our solar system, this is a consequence of a violent encounter between opposing forces that gives the appearance of stability and order. Marxism is the method born of revolutionary faith. The faith is not in an ideology. It's not even a faith in the revolution. It's more like an attuneness to the brutality of existence and reality. It's the real. You can run from it, you can hide from it, you can cope in the face from it, or you can accept it and you can recognize it. Be as revolutionary as reality itself. If you see postmodern capitalism as alienating, as brutal, as violent with respect to your sensibilities and your comfort zone, you need to be even more revolutionary. You don't retreat into a hug box. I'm not critiquing Comrade Brigham here. I'm directing this at a specific modality of sensibility with respect to how we articulate what it means to be a communist in the 21st century in this world. No one can ever defer to the masses and say, the masses are with me. What are the masses? The masses are not your family, your neighbors, your friends, and your community. I'm sorry, they're not. The masses are masses. They exist at scale. If you don't want the coldness and ruthlessness of that abstraction, then name them all as individuals. And it's in this sense that I say revolutionary first, ideology second. Because revolution is the objective fact. The world of constant movement and motion. That is just true. It doesn't matter what your ideas are. It doesn't matter what your fantasies are, what your desires are. Everything that exists deserve to perish. Ling Lao, what's up? Appreciate you. My critique of ideology is not based in naive realism. My critique of ideology is based in a different kind of realism, a different kind of principle of realism. One that is, yes, dialectical, but dialectics isn't philosophy. Dialectics is not a relationship between concepts. Dialectics is first and foremost the insight into contradictions. Before thoughts, before ideas, before any of that exists, reality is suspended in motion, in revolutionary motion. Because it's not only motion, it's a motion that returns to place. It returns, and it returns differently, right? This is the essence of a revolution. Returning to place, but what is returning is not what appears as what was before. It's still the same thing in essence. It's the same essence, only if we regard the essence as a relationship, a contradictory relationship. The only determination that is real is the relation of opposites. In any case, am I talking about the economic minister? I'm talking about the poet. The poet. Goethe. Goethe. How do I say his name? I don't know. I only know how to read it. Goethe. Okay, Goethe. What form of Marxism would exist in postmodernity? Can I tell you the type of Marxism I'm on? The type of Marxism that I'm on is, at some point in my life, I realized how stupid subjectivism was, in the sense that the entire basis of Cartesian modernity is being overtaken by a new epoch of humanity, the Chinese era. I talked about this in my early streams a lot. This is OG infrared shit, right? I talked about how classical modernity is over. There's a new metaphysical horizon, so to speak. Completely supplants everything we know about objects and subjects and so on. And I came to that realization that true revolutionary gnosis is do nothing and win. People underestimate this. I spent a great deal of my time before I was public immersing myself in Chinese Marxism, philosophy, history, and the Chinese way of looking at things. At a certain point, there was a profound faith and confidence I had in Xi Jinping. I was thinking to myself, America is destined for a long night. China is ascendant. Everything will be fine. Everything will be okay. I no longer felt any kind of urgency to act. No revolutionary excitement, because nothing is more revolutionary than reality itself. And I found it beautiful. Reality by itself is so revolutionary and so ruthless that it falls back into place and it harmoniously reconciles contradictions by virtue of its being. And that is something that belongs to being. It's not something we have to will into existence because we wish it, because we desire it so. Now keep in mind, this is a long period of reflection about the history of Marxism, like China's Cultural Revolution, and the existential questions raised by it. The contradiction between our moral sentiments that are attached to communism and our disappointments from we want to be good. We want things to be good, but then everything gets disappointing. What if reality disappoints us? Can we trust reality? Can we trust the masses? We talk about the masses, but what if the masses don't agree with us? What if they don't share our convictions? Or what if, instead of contradicting our convictions, they simply exist in a state of antithesis with respect to our ideas, such that our ideas can't account for them? Isn't that pretty traumatic? It's a chaos. The masses are chaos. reality is a chaos. And should we build a refuge? Does being a Marxist mean we build a refuge at the expense of reality through political correctness, through institutions, through gatekeeping, collectively deluding ourselves about what reality is, and making sure to pretend like we don't find certain jokes funny and stuff? Should we performatively aspire to be what we regard as the good, even if it comes at the expense of how we actually feel? So these are the kind of deep questions which are stupid when I describe them, of course, but I try to think about the logical consequences of this kind of line of inquiry and how much it can really take you down a rabbit hole. Eventually, I came to the conclusion, which was a conclusion that I found adequate and fulfilling at the mental level, at the level of my consciousness, at the level of my feeling, at the level of my sensibility. Do nothing, win. I don't have to be a revolutionary adventurer. I could just be a normal guy, go to law school, live a normal life, have a normal family. And this would be the ultimate form of taqiyya, because I'm just going to blend in with society with this secret knowledge in my head that society is going to be submitted to the mercy of very profound revolutionary changes. Not even necessarily on account of anyone's political will, but just because of the nature of how the world is changing, how the mode of production is changing, how socialism or communism will be victorious because we're already living in it, in a sense, and that everything will simply fall into place, led by Xi Jinping and led by China. Everything will be fine. And a lot of serenity came with this kind of gnosis, this enlightenment on my part. And I had completely abandoned any aspiration for intervening in reality, let alone talking to other people about my views and evangelizing. I thought all that is so stupid. It's so stupid because why? You speak, you give it to the world, and it comes out the wrong direction. You speak to the world and you destroy what you wanted and intended to communicate by doing so. By pretending the subject of communication is unlimited and undefined when it is in fact defined. For example, I could speak into the void and say, to whomever it may concern. But we know only some people are going to receive that message based not on some universal commitment to reason or curiosity, but because they come from a specific demographic or background or some kind of material disposition to incline them to agree with you. What is it about human nature that compels people, for example, to just spill their heart out to the world? You notice it takes people more effort to just shut the fuck up than to spill their heart out. If you think something that contradicts what you're told, your first instinct is to just run to the hills and scream it on top of the mountaintops. Young Soviet, what's up? Instead of, who you should scream it to? Yourself. You should tell yourself what you intend to tell others and measure it up to something. Tell yourself and ask yourself, what could you respond? Do what Plato did in his dialogues. Respond to yourself. Put on a puppet show. Okay, this is what I want to scream to the world. Okay, hypothetically, to play the devil's advocate, this is how I could respond. That's how you develop dialectics. You understand? Because a lot of times, most communists within the past 30 or 40 years, what you are screaming to the mountaintops and telling society, they already gave you their response. And you went no further than that. And you retreated back. You gave them your response. And what did you do? You retreated back and you said, these people are brainwashed. These people are bigoted. And you went back into some hug box and made an excuse for the fact that your dialectic is undeveloped, that it's unrefined, that it's untested, that it's not anti-fragile, right? You have a fragile dialectical proposition that is immediately shot down by the world. And instead of developing your proposition, you condemn the world itself. Your first mistake was seeking validation and approval from the second term of the dialectical interaction through the world. If you want to address the world with a principle that has already gone through the crucible of some kind of dialectical conflict, address the world with something that has gone through it, that has anticipated the response of the world, that accounts for the contradictions within the world. I don't want to keep rambling about this. I had come to a position which I think if you discovered it tomorrow, I could already anticipate. You'd be like, damn, I'm enlightened. I've reached gnosis. And it's like you're 5-6 years behind, right? Position that I think is mature and advanced with respect to almost all existing ideological sensibilities and sentiments and so on. I sound like a douchebag. I don't give a fuck. Genuinely what I think. So what changed? Why did I commit the cardinal sin and hit this live button and start screaming at the world? Why did I do that? Why did I decide one day, could I not help it? Was there something unconscious that compelled me to do this? Did I need to talk to the world and share my views? Do nothing happen, right? So why did I feel like I needed to make an intervention in reality? When I give people this answer, and I always do, they never understand. Okay, one person got it, and I'm surprised that they got it. Precisely at the moment that I felt like I was subjectively at peace with the world, mentally and whatever, as a communist, I was just okay. Everything's gonna be fine. I don't need, I genuinely optimistic, and not in a naive sense, but I'm at peace. When I found peace, I was in the middle of law school and on course for a normal life. My physical nervous system started revolting against me in a way that I literally had no control over. For the first time in my life, I just could not sleep. I straight up stopped being able to sleep. The more I think about it, the more I understand why that is. I read about how Mao couldn't sleep. He was taking sleeping pills a lot. In its most brilliant, or I should say its most dramatic manifestation during the Cultural Revolution, it was a restless dialectic. Restless. The continuous intensity of infinite multitudes of contradictions. Reality. This is what the dragon is, by the way. But how do you sleep? That was the question the Cultural Revolution couldn't answer. The Cultural Revolution could not address the question of how do communists sleep, because it's a constant, continuous state of wakefulness, awareness, consciousness, comprehension of the dragon, of the contradictory and revolutionary nature of existence, continuously imposed and grasped and seized upon by a wrathful, angry consciousness. And this is Chinese Marxism, really, it is, in a stupid way that I'm putting in it, but it's relevant to what I'm trying to say. The only way China was able to rest, it had to force. This is what I think is often an overlooked fact about Chinese communism or Chinese Marxism in its history. Many people from the West will make the wrong conclusion that during the Cultural Revolution, everyone had to constantly impose and force upon themselves ideology, right? We have to constantly sing the songs. We have to constantly shout the slogans, but secretly, we don't like doing it. It's not how we feel. We don't want to do it, but we're only doing it because of political belief, and it's not sincere. Deng Xiaoping finally opened up by just allowing people to breathe and just, okay, now I can finally just be myself and let go. Actually, the opposite is true. The thing that was the most seductive, compelling, intoxicating, enjoyable, and easy to take hold of your mind was the revolutionary, the spiritual activation of the Chinese masses during the Cultural Revolution, to this day, is of a much higher quality of enjoyment and conscious fulfillment than all the consumer goods and luxury brands and all that stuff that exists in China today. There is such an acuity and intensity of the fulfillment of the spirit, something that fulfilled people, intoxicated and was addicting. The revolutionary passion of the Cultural Revolution was more compelling and could seize hold of the consciousness of the masses far more effectively and intensively than all of the Western consumers. That's why when you study the Chinese post-Deng Xiaoping consumer culture, even I saw this in Beijing myself, Chinese people have a kind of somber attitude to the consumerism, where they will consume, they will try the McDonald's and get consumer goods, but it's a kind of somber, almost indifference. I would rather say it's an indifference that they have. It's not a libidinal intensity of fanaticism, of an extreme degree of subjective engagement. The kind of Chinese consumerism, as much as it might be status-driven, very much somber and calm compared to the frenzy of the Cultural Revolution, for sure. Meaning McDonald's has not taken over the consciousness of the Chinese people. No, and Disney hasn't, Nike hasn't. Why do you think China didn't become a liberal democracy? Think about it. The West penetrated China with all of its soft power, stupid ideology. It's Disney, it's Coca-Cola, whatever. The Chinese were not impressed compared to the level of subjective engagement that they had experienced during the Cultural Revolution. It never measured up. It never actually was able to surmount that. And people don't understand this about China. What Deng Xiaoping's reform, or the post-Cultural Revolution period, which was necessary, did was it had to impose the revolutionary outlook It had to force that into the recesses of the Chinese unconscious. It had to repress it forcibly, not so it would be annihilated, but so it could finally exist unconsciously. And the only manifestation of the unconscious is in the dreams when you're sleeping. So the China's night during the reform and opening up period, the Cultural Revolution and its kind of ideology was not discarded. It was repressed into the recesses of the unconscious. And all of the consumerism and openness was precisely a way to escape that. It was to repress and to escape and distract, in a sense. And that had to be something, that was the thing that had to be imposed. That was the thing that had to be adopted forcibly, in a way. Sometimes when I listen to the revolutionary songs from the Chinese period of the Cultural Revolution, I find it so compelling and so stirring and so intense. I don't want to fucking listen to any other music. Like, I'm like, every other song kind of sucks. This shit is so, like, motivating. I'm at the gym. It fucking lifts my spirits up. I feel like I can lift mountains. It's so compelling and rousing of the spirit. But then I can't sleep. I'm so activated that I cannot sleep. So I force myself to listen to normie music and stupid, meaningless music just to have an unconscious again. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because why did I make the decision to intervene into the world the way that I did? When I was insomnia and I simply couldn't sleep, the fullest completion of my adoption of Marxism, when I finally adopted Marxism to such a point where on a full subjective level, I was completely a communist. At that point, I could no longer sleep, like, physically. I hate saying this because a lot of people go, I couldn't sleep at night. No, there's nothing wrong with me in my head. I wasn't guilty. I wasn't upset. I wasn't distressed. I was so happy and I was so fine. I literally could just suddenly not sleep anymore. And my life became a nightmare. All the problems in my life at that point came from the fact that I just couldn't sleep. Everything else was fine. I was in the middle of law school. It was all great. I was like on course for a very great normal life. I couldn't fucking sleep. Can you think about that for a second? You just can't sleep anymore. Imagine you're a normie and that just happens to you. You straight up just can't sleep. Maybe sometimes you can sleep 1 or 2 hours a night. Very unpleasant sleep, by the way. But I just couldn't sleep anymore. That's when I had that aha moment, which was basically like, the reason I'm telling you guys this story is because I'm trying to give you advice. I'm observing an error, ideological fanaticism, or I should say delusion, versus realism. And I'm trying to share this story to give you an understanding of what does it mean to be a communist actually in the 21st century, right? I realized that the reason I couldn't sleep is because there had been something I got wrong about the dialectic. I'll just simplify it that way. I had fully internalized Mao's dialectic. Like, I was one with the dragon. I just couldn't sleep anymore. So this led me to slowly realize, not even necessarily on a conscious intellectual level, but on a level of my entire sensibility, my entire outlook of the world and so on, that Mao's dialectic was incomplete. That's what I took my insomnia to mean. Mao's dialectic was not complete. There was another term in the dialectical process of reconciliation, which created an irony. The moment that finally, on an objective level, let's say, socialism triumphs, the good guys win, it's over. China is ascending, Xi Jinping is leading the world into a new era, a new civilization is triumphant and ascendant, and so on. Communism all along proved itself to be a negation within the dialectic that led to the third term of the reconciliation of civilizations, or reawakening after dormancy for so long. Communism guided lost civilizations to their reawakening, to their self-realization, basically. Once you excise the subjectivist element from the revolutionary consciousness, and from Marxism. And by subjectivist element, the one that is at odds or at least anxious about reality, the one that is somehow unreconciled with reality, let's just say it that way, which is all Marxism thus far, right? I finally overcame that problem. Okay, finally I'm at peace with reality. My mistake in achieving that peace was assuming that reality itself doesn't have fangs. Fangs? There's subjectivist fangs that want to intervene and change reality and be bombastic on account of this consciousness and this moral whatever. I was like, okay, that's gone. Everything will be fine. But then I neglected to realize that unruly subjective element, for example, the one we see during the Cultural Revolution in China, that is something objective itself. That is proper to reality. Not within people's consciousness and in their head, but within their existence. There is a violence that corresponds to it. It's not a smooth, peaceful development. It's a violence. Like late 2020, early 2021, the minute I started hitting live, the hallucination of CPUSA and the American Civil War struck me like lightning. If Mao's dialectic is not finished, that means the reconciliation has been an illusion. And we are in store for a lot of fireworks. What does it say in the national anthem with the rockets? We're in store for that, for sure. We're in store for a big storm. The revolution is happening, and it is going to compel our subjects. I can't perform takia. I can't just be in law school and be like, I have this knowledge within me about this new era we're entering into, but I'm going to blend in with society and be normal because I'll be vindicated anyway and I don't need to intervene. My body literally didn't allow me to do that. I had to expend that distance between myself and the world that I was hiding was too expensive to maintain. I had to articulate it into something I could give back to the world. As a matter of physical necessity, I will admit myself as this. I didn't go live because I'm a messiah and a great revolutionary. I kept streaming because I literally couldn't sleep otherwise. The more I would yell and the more I would scream at the top of my lungs, just like rage on camera, I would sleep soundly. Raging on camera was my way of curing my insomnia. That's the only way I could sleep. People don't know this, but the Mongoloid video, I slept really well that night. I had no sleep. I got all that off my chest. I slept really fucking well at night. What I'm trying to say is that I did this out of physical necessity. I'd probably die otherwise. I couldn't sleep. People say, just sleep. I can't. I literally tried everything. I couldn't sleep. And that's why I hit the live button. That is the origin of this whole thing. Why am I telling you this? If there's a lesson in there, I think that the body of America is going to revolt against a peaceful and content mind in the same way mine did against me. And what I think is that there's going to be a stirring within this country, an awakening, an explosive conclusion of a long dialectic that will be violent. And not on our account, not on my account, not on anyone else's. It's going to be a storm. It's going to happen like a storm. I acquired such a clarity in those months about the future of America. People go, how do you get this vision? The truth, I got a very distorted vision in a way, but a strong clarity of feeling about the future of this country. That it's not going to go down into the night peacefully. It's going to be a storm, a very brutal, ugly, violent, explosive thing. And maybe this is the projections of an insomniac. Every time I'm looking at the direction this country's going in, I feel like I'm on the mark. I literally feel the Civil War happening, like at the most visceral level of my nervous system. It's happening. And I don't know how to explain to people just how much China already won. In a sense, people don't appreciate yet. China went through that Cultural Revolution and it gave them a kind of civilizational and existential level of perspective that is just so much more advanced than anything else that exists. When the Chinese said that we have stood up, when they awoke, when China awakened after 1949, it did shake the whole world in ways that make the grand proclamations of its revolutionary era, that it's not an exaggeration. China fundamentally changed humanity and planet Earth. So much so that I could say we are in the West and in America living in a Gnostic world of illusions. And China has this perception of the true reality that we do not. And we're living in a world of illusions and inertia. And China already got it. They understand. And what did China get? And I talk about this in my old streams, but China, what awakened with China is a new logos. And if you don't want to call it a logos, call it what they call it, a new Tao. They have awakened to the reality of the Tao. The Tao is a ruthless dimension of the contradiction, one that is not based on the relationship of concepts, nor based on the relationship between substantive empirical objects, as the naive Marxists regard it. That the Taoist dialectic, if you want to call it that, is a vicious, ruthless, powerful, magnificent dialectic that they unleashed. They somehow tapped into it and allowed it to pulverize and break through the barrier of Anglo-Saxon 17th century metaphysical prison that humanity was in after modernity. The Chinese Taoist dialectic of modernity, in a machine-like way, tore apart and ravaged to shreds, tore to shreds the Anglo-Saxon metaphysics of the 17th century and just pulled through it with an intensity and violence that was seamlessly thrusted upon the world stage. It smoothly cut through. And I think Dugan has a good description of the Chinese logos, the dragon, so to speak. Anyway, let me continue. People ask, why doesn't China do more for the world and in the world? I'll tell you why. Because China attained the most advanced and most aggressive and violent, in the more refined sense of the word, revolutionary consciousness ever achieved in the history of mankind. The Cultural Revolution was not some stupid exercise of elites or intellectuals. It took hold of the entirety of Chinese society, okay? They internalized that. It was taken to the recesses of the Chinese unconscious. And within that unconscious, China's ascendancy has torn through the fabric of the old world order. There is nothing more disruptive and violent and revolutionary than that in the past decades. Nothing. So everything you want China to do, so superfluous compared to what they've already done, without even imposing it upon reality as a matter of subjective conceit. By the way, civilize the mind, make the body savage. That's another example of that dialectic I'm talking about. People do not appreciate Mao Zedong thought. There's a lot of stupidity where people are like, what's Mao Zedong thought? It's not like Guy Debord is sophisticated. Oh my God, you don't get it. You really were not going to make it because you lack the understanding of how much thinking was an articulation of the entire consciousness of the Chinese civilization, not only at that point, but up to that point, meaning the context of ancient Chinese literature, the classics of Chinese literature and poetry and sentiment. This is a very different way of relating to the world and reality. Even just the Chinese language itself is a fundamentally different way of articulating being and reality than our way of doing it, the one that we're used to. And people don't get that. They don't appreciate it. People, where did China come from? China's taking over the world. You should humble yourself and study what happened, because a lot happened while you were sleeping and mocking China. But that has happened. So is it over? Is the whole thing over? Is it finally complete? And when I say the whole thing, Marxism, the revolutionary cause, communism, is it just over now? And no. According to my nervous system, no. And according to what we see, no, because at every turn of development and change within our country, in terms of how fast things are changing here and how we're responding to this new order that has been inadvertently produced as a consequence of China's ascendancy, how we're adapting to it and responding to it and reacting to it as a country, it's taking us deeper and deeper down the abyss, and it's imposing upon us an internal conflict and confrontation that is intensifying. It is intensifying. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because don't feel the need to impose an ideology on reality. If you have enough discernment, I think people hide behind revolutionary ideology because they're scared of revolutionary reality. They would prefer to have strong slogans and strong delusions than confront the dragon itself. That reality itself is far more revolutionary than any idea or conviction you can hold dear to your heart. And facing that is, face that. Don't hide behind ideas. Don't hide behind, for God's sake, don't run from the alienation in the world. Don't run from being terminally online. Don't run from the internet. Don't run from culture. Don't run from anything. Don't run from pop music. Don't run from popular bullshit. Don't run from stupid bullshit on TikTok. Don't even run from brain rot. Don't insulate yourself from anything that disturbs and calls into question and upsets the sensibility and ideas that you're comfortable with. Everything must be submitted to the test and the crucible of its most violent and ruthless opposite before it can be regarded and considered as real. It's not healthy to watch that. Do you know how easy it is for me to become a red guard in my consciousness? Do you know how easy it is for me to shun the world and shun TikTok, shun movies and TV and everything, and just be an ascetic red guard Maoist? You think that's hard for me? It's not hard for me. In fact, it's tempting. I fight that temptation because it's easier than what I'm doing now, which is embracing the entirety of what reality is instead of hiding from it. You think I was tempted to become a Twitch streamer? You think that was tempting for me to be on Twitch, become entertaining and relatable to people and funny to people? You think that's actually what I find easy? As you guys witnessed, it was really hard for me. And not because it's physically demanding or whatever. It's hard for me to bring myself to want to do that. What I'm tempted to do is be an ascetic Maoist Red Guard, like proverbially. Tapping into reality and putting yourself at the mercy of the real in some sense. And what is the real, by the way? The real is the opposing force with respect to the conceits of your consciousness and the stupid fantasies you create to create comfortable world for yourself. Everything that opposes the world is real. Everything that opposes your preconceptions is real. Everything that forces you out of your comfort zone is real. The real is boring. Increasingly, yes. Why? Because it's becoming a hug box. For example, in America, you don't have a wilderness of the imaginary anymore. You have a domesticated, familiar face. You have Netflix. You have ugly actors and ugly actresses on Netflix to make you feel more content with how you appear. For example, you have forms of media and consumption and streamers that are telling you what you want to hear and being nice. Guess what is left that's real? Because the sheer volume and intensity of culture and media, for example, I'll admit it's not direct. The culture industry, no, it's no longer a receptacle of the real. So what is real? Conflict. Work is real, really? I beg to differ. Most jobs are total bullshit. The last real thing is conflict and war. Not war necessarily in a armed struggle sense, but war in the sense of irreconcilable contradictions within information. This dimension of the logos continues to be very authentic and very real and very open. I know AI is shitting everything up, but AI can't tango in a war. In a discursive war, information war. It can't. It really can't. I see when my haters or whatever reply with AI, ChatGPT, it's a nothing. This is not opposition to what I'm saying. This is nothing. This doesn't reflect any kind of authentic dialectical opposition to my position. The last real thing is the conflict. We must look handsome and beautiful. You're missing the point of what I'm trying to say. There's no retreat. That's it. You have to be online. Like, you have to be. If you're not online, every time I go to an ACP event, you know how I feel? I feel like, oh, fuck the internet. I'm with my people. This is so much better than that dumb bullshit. We're chilling. But you know what that is? That's just losing perspective of the scale within which things are happening. Because you're experiencing only what's in front of you. And that's much more pleasant and comfortable than what's going on at scale. What's going on at scale is really fucked up. Some people say, what's going on at scale doesn't concern me. I just ignore it and tune out of it, and that's fine. You can't do that as a communist. Our commons as a communist is an unpleasant commons. It's not the commons of when you go in person and meet with people and there's 10 or 20 people and you're all together around a campfire. That's not the commons relevant to the word communism. The commons that is relevant to the word communism, you know when people go, I hate watching the news, I hate seeing all the fucked up shit going on in the world. The fucked up shit, that's the commons relevant to communism. The thing that disturbs your everyday individual experience of life should be on the mind and concerning communists. Who else is going to think about that kind of shit? Who else is that for? When we increasingly start seeing on the news or on social media killer clown gangs and people in this country massacring each other, who is going to take responsibility? Or whose problem is that? What crisis is this a consequence of? How do we make sense of it? It's people embedded in pleasantries that find themselves caught in the worst excesses and atrocities of our current civilization. People who are not thinking consciously about their relationship to the world. Master, what's up? So they offer themselves as receptacles of the prevailing logic of society. The prevailing logic of our society is an abstract logic. If you're not aware of it, you will become possessed by it, and you will think about all the hideous, fucked up criminals committing all these horrible crimes. These people are receptacles of the logic of a very sick society, and they are offline. The ones that are online are at war, so they think, with society. So we're the only ones that want to take responsibility, that want to wage a war on behalf of the people, for the people, not against them, not out of hatred toward them, not out of resentment toward them, but as a consequence of faith in them. And who are the people? The people are precisely those that you will never meet, that you cannot name, that you do not see, and that will never know you. These are my words of wisdom. Yankee, I'm not talking about you. You don't have to be on X if you don't want to be. You're missing the point of what I'm trying to say. Communism is not a safe space from the world. All the most brutal disappointments, savage inconveniences of the world should be internalized by us continuously. Only when we have done so can we prevail and assert ourselves against it. But you can't retreat. I haven't been mentioning Comrade Brigham or what specific criticism I think would be relevant for him, because I wanted to talk more generally about disappointment and hope as a communist, and you have an expectation and reality. So I'm addressing a more general problem of the communist outlook. But regarding Comrade Brigham, I would say communism will never directly strike the consciousness of the masses. It's never going to happen. Simply going down and talking to people and doing what is right according to a doctrine or something is never going to be direct. Look, 7% is not nothing. It's a thoroughly Republican town, okay? So it's not nothing. But in terms of expectations or why there could be disappointment if you don't achieve those expectations, you have to appraise reality in a more ruthless way. You cannot presume the masses are biased in your favor because you think you have a correct understanding of the situation. You expect the masses to be on your side because this is the situation. You may be correct about the situation in terms of what's wrong, but rousing people and mobilizing them to show up for you, it's a totally different thing. No, we did not run a candidate. We did not run a candidate. There was a comrade who was running in the middle of or at the end of their campaign, joined our party. We did not publicly say anything or endorse anything, but they are in low spirits as a consequence of the results. We didn't think their prospects were anywhere close to large, but we had been misinformed because of some mistakes made on the ground there, that his prospects were much higher than they actually were. It was just an honest mistake. He's a good guy. Again, in the spirit of Mao's self-criticism, I'm going to just look stupid right now. Like the message I sent about getting hyped, we thought that when the results came in, maybe he wouldn't win, but it would be like, wow, what a great pull. Like we were not given accurate information. And because of honest mistakes, by the way, it wasn't intentional, but I feel obligated and responsible to explain to you what I was so confident in. I was hyping up that we would have some exciting news on that front. But alas, we keep going forward. And by the way, our party wasn't really involved with it in the first place. It's not something we organized. It's not something we planned for. It's not something we strategized for. This was one guy by himself with almost no resources in the middle of Georgia, in one of the most conservative towns, calling himself a communist, doing this. Anyway, I'm going to the Southeast this weekend for the Southeast Summit. I'll be in the American South. I'll be there. NYC. I may actually be going in for another debate hosted by the same guy that hosted the Praxben debate, Ekmat. He messaged me if I want to debate about China being fascist. I said, sure. But there's no debate opponent yet. I'd be going to NYC in that case at the end of the month. Yeah. When am I coming to Pennsylvania? Maybe you guys should put together a Northeast Summit. It wasn't called a Northeast Summit, I'll tell you that. Gettysburg. I wasn't even invited, so there you go. I wasn't even told about it. He might have invited me, but I didn't get the message. My bad. I probably overlooked it or something. If you found the stream a little bit insightful, I don't know. I'm going to try to stream tomorrow. We'll see. I'll try tomorrow. Anyway, guys, see you when I see you. Hopefully IRL. All right, y'all. New York City's still going to be a shithole, but now socialism is going to be blamed for that. We're going to get some accountability in our society. So all the dead rats and dead people on the subway and all this shit everywhere and piss everywhere and all the garbage and bullshit and people running around naked and on crack and stuff. Now there's going to be accountability and socialism's to blame. So nothing changed. Only this guy who calls himself a socialist got elected, so suddenly a switch is going to be flipped. All the problems of New York City that have always existed are going to be blamed on us. Get ready for that. Guys, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.